Welcome to the Flower Essence Podcast, and join us on an exploration of the healing wisdom of flowers.
With combined decades of experience in the study and practice of flower essence therapy, I, Kathleen Aspens, and co-host Rokana Feld guide you to reconnect to nature with these potent vibrational remedies. Welcome back to the Flower Essence Podcast. Today, I am just delighted to be sharing this time not only with Ro, but with our guest, Rachel Singleton. Rachel Singleton is a professionally trained advanced essence practitioner. She studied homeopathy to postgraduate level and is a licensed homeopath and member of the Lakeland College of Homeopathy. She has also completed a diploma in therapeutic healing with the Rowan School of Healing and is a Reiki master. She worked for several years as a tutor member of the British Flower and Vibrational Essence Association and an advanced essence practitioner and is a member of the committee. She has tutored students in the UK and abroad to become accredited advanced essence practitioners. Thank you so much for being with us. You've been doing this as a therapeutic practice for 20 years, working with people in the UK, and you've also created your own line of essences, the LightBringer Essences. We are so happy to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Kathleen and Ro. It's absolutely lovely to be here with you.
So I'd love to start a little bit with just tell us, I know that you mentioned that you have a fuller expanded version of your story and how you came to essences on your website, but we'd love to just know a little bit about you just to get started and get a feel for what your perspective is on essences and why you got so interested in them in the first place.
Yeah, so I actually came across them when I was training as a homeopath. So we were very fortunate to have a very forward-thinking college that we were part of for our homeopathic training, myself and my peer group, and we all loved it there. The teachers were all passionate and articulate and brilliant homeopaths. And in amongst them, several of them were using flower essences as part of their practice. So they felt, even with all that homeopathy could do, and with the strong correlation between so many homeopathic remedies and emotional and mental states, they so felt that there was this whole area that essences touched and were needed for, and they would treat with the two things. So I think it was our first weekend there. We walked into one of our lectures and the lecturer came in with a huge bunch of flowers and with all the Australian bush flower essence cards, and spent the next 2 hours blowing our minds, teaching us about this incredible healing modality. And I didn't know, I was about 23 at the time. I didn't know anything about the flower essences. I hadn't grown up with an alternative background in any way, shape or form. And this was all new to me. And I sat there in that lecture just mesmerized, feeling like I'd absolutely come home. And just the very idea that flowers could be a medicine just made so much sense to me. I'd grown up with, my mum is a plant historian, and she's deeply interested in everything to do with plants, plant history, herbalism, and especially as it pertains to literature. She weaves the two together, and that's been her life's work all along. So I've grown up with rare plants dotted all over the garden and national plant collections and this, that, and the other, and going to nurseries and hanging out there whilst she's propagating for somebody or other. And so plants have just been part of my life as I've grown up. But this was a whole new relationship with them. And it was something about their soulful quality and their beauty and their grace. You know, all of these things just absolutely drew me. So I often joke that I went into my homeopathic training to be a homeopath and I came out being a flower essence practitioner because it was that I knew was really what I was there for. And so I then just followed that passion for the next 20 years. And I also knew on that first afternoon that I was going to make a range of essences. And that didn't emerge until a year or two later. And I do tell that story in detail on the website. But just to say, I mean, my first attempts, I did them completely by the letter, followed Dr. Bach's instructions and did what I was told. And actually, they didn't do anything. You know, I gave them to my tutors and people all excited, and they didn't do anything. And nobody kind of took much notice of them. They were very kind, but they, you know. And then I had a much more personal experience. I had the experience of losing someone I loved very much. And during that, throughout that time, the pain of that was such that I found myself reaching for plants in a way that I never had before. And I was out walking one day and I knew the only thing that could touch the suffering that I was in was something exquisite. And it was flowers. I just knew that they spoke the language that I needed at that time, and that they would come in deep and tend me in a way that was safe and intimate and appropriate, and that would reach into all the places that it needed to reach. And that was the day that I made what I call a proper essence. and I think that sort of set the bar for me then going forward as to what a flower essence moment is, when we look into a flower and know it as our medicine, and know that we need to connect with that at a deeper level than just to sit with the flower. We actually need to take that into our being and let it do its work. So I've spent the last 20 years letting flowers teach me.
That's a beautiful story, and I love the visual imagery of your growing up with all the rare and exotic flowers everywhere. Do you still practice homeopathy, or did you ever after graduating?
Yeah, I did actually, and it's evolved and changed along the ways. I use it in a very, very different way now. I kind of do the opposite to what we were taught then. So I use flower essences as my main modality, and I bring in a homeopathic remedy for support here and there if I need it. And what I'll see the homeopathic remedy doing is perhaps a more, I don't know what the word is really. It's not that it's a deeper catalyst, but it's something a little bit stronger maybe. So, you know, I feel like essences, one of the things that essences do is they very much work as a catalyst. And there's a gentle kind of suffused quality to that. And sometimes there's a more gritty element that a homeopathic remedy can bring in, something deep and constitutional. But by and large, I would say 90% of the work that I'm doing is essences rather than homeopathy.
So, for example, some of the homeopathic remedies are flowers that are also flower essences. And I've always been curious. I think calendula might be one. There's probably a lot of others. How they differ in, you know, is the homeopathic remedy more physical, working on symptomatic issues, and then the flower essence. How would you describe the difference energetically?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess there's 3 homeopathic remedies that immediately come to mind. So aconite, calendula, crataegus. So crataegus is hawthorn. And crataegus as a herb, if we use it in a really, really physical form, is for the heart and for balancing and toning the heart. And then we can use it in a really low dose homeopathically and do exactly the same thing. Or we can use it in a much higher dose and I guess, going deeper to support and catalyze the vital force within the heart's actual functioning, so really going in behind even the physical. And then the essences. So, for example, in my range, there's a hawthorn blossom and a hawthorn berry. And hawthorn blossom is for knowing the worth of what you have. So counting your blessings. And it's when there's a yearning and a pining for something else, thinking that the grass is greener over there. So you can see how that comes back to the heart, how the heart is almost like lovesick, pining, yearning, and that brings the heart out of balance. So we can use hawthorn blossom as an essence to help the person reorientate with the fact that actually they've got all these beautiful seeds in their life waiting to blossom, that they have what they need, that Spirit's given them that. And hawthorn berries is for receiving the fruits of our labours, getting our heart's desires. So that came up with observing so many people who work very hard, but often don't reap the rewards of that. So maybe the tendency to work and keep working takes away from the actual sitting back and receiving what comes from that, the joy of creating and manifesting and achieving, before they're rushing on to the next project or the next thing that they want to work on. And all of these are different aspects of treating the heart and working with the heart. So yeah, it is fascinating to look at one plant through different healing modalities, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And as an herbalist, I look at it that way as well. So I just am not as familiar with homeopathy. Just I know enough to probably be dangerous. But I love looking at the homeopathic provings and literature to also help inform, another dimension of flower essence work. So I think it's really interesting to see how they've evolved, how they were developed, and what they're used for, and if that has anything that can help inform the way the flower essence can be used as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's been so many. There's been the new meditative provings, this whole range of kind of new homeopathic remedies over the last 10 or 20 years, which focus much more on gems and crystals and sea salt and trees, and their energy is so close to essences. It's like they're a bridge between the old homeopathy, which feels like it comes from a different era, and this homeopathy, which feels like it's been born out of these times, and then essences. And it's those newer remedies that I'm really loving to use, because they have a lightness to them. They're less likely to kind of trigger any aggravations or intensification of symptoms, and they seem to be truly transformational, really touching the spiritual as well as the rest of the energy being. And it's a delight to work with those.
Are those a certain brand, or how do we know what the new ones are?
So there's some really good books out there. Colin Griffiths has done some very good books. He's got a couple of Materia Medicas, and Madeline Evans has got a couple of books, and they were both from a circle of homeopaths who were particularly doing these new provings. But I would imagine they're not the only ones. That was in the UK. I would imagine there'll be other ones. So there's pharmacies in the UK, like Helios Homeopathic Pharmacy would have those. But yeah, it's really interesting to look at those things like Emerald, which are for shock, for going into hospital, and there's just so many interesting remedies, and they're kind of touching this middle ground, I think. Yeah.
And it brings us into this moment, this extraordinary moment in which we're living, and how we can be bringing this nature's healing patterning into our own lives, into this process of managing what's happening and meeting it with the most grace as we can. And how are you? I love that you're using the modern homeopathy. I've had a little bit of experience with that, and you're right. It really does feel different. It really does have a different energetic, and I think too, what you're talking from your early experiences with the Bach essences of how they were of a different time, and now the more modern essences. Not that the old ones are bad or anything, but the more modern essences are meeting us in a different place, and depending on the client you're working with or whatever, you kind of meet them with essences that meet them, and so many of us are working with this moment right now that's pretty extraordinary. And how are you helping your clients in this moment? Helping to, I think that you too in the UK are under a shelter-in-place kind of order. I don't know if that's where we are in California and a lot of the United States.
Yeah, I don't know how recent it is with you. I mean, we've really gone to lockdown within the last few days, so everybody is still adjusting to this. And yeah, there's been a lot of fear in the air for sure. A lot of fear and a lot of kind of drawing lines and boundaries. So people not wanting people who don't live in an area to come to that area. And if they are, then measures being taken which are not very friendly. So there's a sense of, some defensiveness and moral policing going on, for sure. That's dominating a lot of the kind of general conversations. And then I think behind closed doors, there's some real vulnerability and fear and isolation. And yet within that, one of the things that I've heard a lot is people who are just saying, you know what, I'm loving that the traffic stopped. I'm loving that there's no aeroplanes flying overhead and that the sky is just clear. I'm loving that everyone's unplugging and going quiet and coming back to what matters and spending time in their homes with the loved ones, reading, doing, there's this sense of this is an opportunity. This is a time when we can go quiet and go within. And each time I hear that, I smile, because that to me feels like the best response, this sense of almost like the quietness is the remedy. And certainly when I'm talking to people, I'm just feeling like that what I want to do is to just be very quiet and very present and really hear, what is the distress here? And that feels more important than ever before. And just allowing space for that to be witnessed and felt. Because we don't need to judge our own feelings. We don't need to judge our own vulnerability or our fears here. We really want to be making space for them, because that's how we move through them so quickly. We recognize them as energy and as energy in motion, emotion that just needs to move through us. And as we do that and we don't resist that process, then it moves through us beautifully. And that movement through us is cleansing and aligning, and it helps us adjust to the new situation. So for me, it's really about facilitating that and supporting that. How does that resonate for you two?
Well, we're going through a similar thing here, and isn't that interesting. I mean, we know this is a global phenomenon, but here it is really validating to speak to someone from across the pond, so to speak, that is going through such a similar thing. In Sonoma County, California, we've been in shelter in place for a little bit longer. It's been over a week, 10 days or something like that. And at first the parks were open, and we live near the coast. And so, it was okay to go out to parks and the coast as long as people kept their 6-foot distance. And over the last weekend, it exploded. It was, I guess, it was like spring break or something, and as hundreds and hundreds of people had been crowding all of the parks and not honoring the 6-foot distance, and so it was a big problem, and it caused them to now close all the parks, which is heartbreaking. They're saying people should just kind of stick in their neighborhood and stay in their own place. And there's also there's a lot of vacation rental homes around where I live, and so that's another big controversy: is should people be taking in a rental home right now and stressing the resources of the small communities. So it sounds very similar to what's happening in your area. But from the emotional standpoint, I can really attest to feeling the need to just stay grounded and hold the space for people. And I find, for me personally, it's a process. Because we're also going through it ourselves. And so I'm constantly cycling with my own process and then clearing that away to hold space and bring in the light for a client or a family member, whoever's going through something. And then after that's over, then I'll have to, then I'm doing my clearing, and it feels like a lot of work. But I resonated with what you said about the acceptance, because once there's that feeling of acceptance, it seems to flow a little easier for me.
And what I'm experiencing is that for myself and for the people that I'm interacting with, clients and family members and friends and all that, just everyone is responding to this in ways that speak to where their wounds are. And, so there's not just one way to experience the fear. There's, some people are, doing it in one direction, which could be really kind of manic and frantic. And then some people are doing it from a very kind of reactive place and wanting to keep that away from them as much as possible. So I'm just really trying to notice and watch and feel it in myself also. For me, the biggest thing that's coming up after the initial phase of feeling that sort of frantic, immediate trauma heading my way. And, this is also triggering on, less than 6 months ago, we had the fires here and having to evacuate and almost having our homes burned down. Those sorts of things got re-triggered a little bit. And now it's a little bit more of what feels like grief to me. I feel like I just feel this wave of grief coming my way. And it's really speaking to a lot of my personal grief experiences. And I'm just trying to meet it and accept it and not need to, make it go away or whatever. I think I love what you're saying, Rachel, about the just allowing, this spaciousness of allowing. And I think that that's what we're talking about as practitioners when we create that spaciousness and allow our clients to be where they are. It's a lot like the way nature meets us, right? Nature isn't trying to fix that and here, do this quick and make it go away. Nature just holds us, and we can just be in a place with a tree, with a flower, with the plant, and feel that gentle acceptance and holding, and it allows everything to flow.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I really feel that. I feel we've got that example and that touchstone all the time, haven't we, around us? I'm loving how light it is so early in the morning, and the bird song is so glorious early in the morning. And so I'm finding myself waking with that and just wanting to go outside before the very few people who are going outside are out there. and there's something about the day is just washed clean at that point. You know, it's so pristine. The energy is so pristine. And sitting in that and feeling the rocks beneath you and the tree behind you and is so earthing and so real. You know, we're having a very, very human experience here. The rest of nature, you know, is oblivious to what we're going through. And the real world is carrying on. And there's something about just touching in on that regularly and getting that grounding again. It's very helpful. And yeah, I think our consultation space is this. I often think of it as the essence bowl. You know, I think of how when we make an essence and we have that clear crystal bowl of pristine spring water and we put the blossoms in there, and we wouldn't want to take that essence if that water got muddied, or, you know, if things went in there that contaminated the water in some way. And I often think of the consultation space as this space for that clear self to blossom. And that involves doing a lot less than we think. And it involves being with and quietly seeing both the trauma and the turmoil that's coming through, and also the absolute wholeness of that person in spite of what they're feeling, because both are true at the same time. You know, there they are feeling their brokenness essentially in that moment, and we see and we hear that and know that that's absolutely their reality in that moment. And there is a bigger reality, and that is that they are never anything less than whole. And again, there's something about essences that speaks to that, isn't there? You know, because essences are that full, glorious flower at the peak of its growth. It's like the culmination of everything that plant is when it bursts into flower. And then it's so delicate, that silken, beautiful blossom, and so fragile. And yet it's giving everything. It's not holding back. And I think that we're, as practitioners, it's lovely to think of creating an environment that allows that kind of blossoming.
And I really see the light coming into the flowers when they're in that full peak and when the essence is being made. And I love that you called your line the LightBringer Essences. It's very apropos.
Yeah, and it felt very much like it was about what we've just been saying, I guess. You know, it's partly that flowers are embodied light, and they are full of that at the moment when we make the essence, and then we get to take that in. But also they're speaking to the light in us, and we bring our own light as well. And for me, what essences really point back to is our essential self. You know, so I remember when we were first taught them, and it's often the way that you hear people first speak about them when they're using them to begin with. It's like, you know, what's the right essence for this? What do I take for grief, or what do I take for this? And there's a sense in which we know we can take an essence to calm or be a balm for an emotional state. But there's a deeper level, which is that essences don't need to be taken to correct an uncomfortable emotion. We can take them to activate our connection with our deeper self, to make it more luminous, so that we can live from that place more. Does that resonate for you too?
Absolutely. Yeah. I wondered if you wanted to talk about some of the flowers, the plant allies you've worked with for the Lightbringer range in that theme. I was looking at your website and I saw this light support combination and looking at the flowers in that and seeing that some of them are some that I'm familiar with and some that I'm not. So, yeah, is there anything that comes up to you in this as far as appropriate for this conversation about holding space and shining light in these times?
Yeah, I was listening to your previous podcast when you were really responding to kind of how we can ground, how we can tend the base chakra and look after ourselves in these times when that part of us can feel quite trembly and destabilized, and that brings up all the kind of primal fears and the rage and all of that sort of stuff. And in a sense, we can also look to the crown chakra as a really nice counterbalance for when our root chakra is disturbed as well. So when we go up into the spiritual and into that connection that we have, that it's like that interface at the crown chakra between our spiritual self and our human self. And that's the opening the gateway for us to really connect with spirit energy, divinity, mystery, however we want to speak of it, that's within us, that's around us. And yeah, there's some really beautiful essences that can help with that. So light support combination is definitely one of them. That's kind of one of the first things. That's like our emergency essence in our range. And it's for staying deeply grounded through your roots and opened through your chakra, through your crown chakra. So there's this idea of the it coming right down through the spinal cord, this deep alignment through your center, connecting down with your roots, up with spirit, and you centered and stable in that. So it's lovely and clarifying and light and yet deeply sustaining and supportive. So I feel myself stabilized with that within seconds. And it was the very first combination, so it's been around now for kind of 20 years. So we've had so much feedback from this over the years, and it's like anyone who comes to the range just seems to automatically buy that and then work their way out from there. And one of the essences in there is the very first one I made on the day when I was grieving and needed something exquisite and gentle, and that was Angel Star. And Angel Star is actually a lesser stitchwort, but the name came to me from my grandmother and from her ghost. It came whispering through to me that this is what I was to call it, and that this would be the first essence of the range. And it's for finding our way in dark times. And I often think of it as like a tiny little golden thread in a dark maze, and that it doesn't matter how dark the maze is, that golden thread stays true and it will lead you out. And that thread is our connection back to our truth, to ourself with a capital S. That self that's aligned and whole and deeply well in all circumstances, and that it seems to pull us back into that truth. So when we have that experience of just lots of voices and opinions in our head, kind of, we don't know which way to turn and we're feeling cloudy and dark, and there's lots of things pulling on us. Angel Star's about just this quiet, deep connection in that seems to enable all of that to fall away. And there's essences like golden light in there, which is for being able to see our future not through the eyes of fear, when suddenly everything can look bleak when we're feeling like that, but to see it through trust, and to actually see the dreams of what's our potential in our future, to really walk into that, to be able to envision it and to be able to walk into that. And one of the another favorite of mine in there is grass of Parnassus, which is the most beautiful flower, a lovely kind of mountain flower. And it looks like a little chalice of pearlescent light, and it has a single stem, and that stem grows up through this one single leaf, which is heart-shaped, which curls around the stem. So in order for this crown flower to grow, it has to come up through the heart, and the symbolism of that is just so beautiful. And it's about really being able to own and stand in our own magnificence, our own purity, our own innocence, our own beauty. And it's particularly indicated when people are leaking their power and the light away. So you know how there'll be some people who, when you compliment them, they just dismiss it. They just can't take it, and they can't let it in. And so that would be an example of leaking power away. Or someone who puts themselves down a lot, or hides their light under the bushel, or, all of these ways in which we can deny that we are the light that we are. And grass of Parnassus is just beautiful for stabilizing that connection and teaching you how to stand in that. And for me, the experience of making it was only my second essence, and the experience of making it was phenomenal. I had, as I went to make it, I had this incredibly strong vision, and I saw my own aura as having all these dark holes in it. And it was just like, I'd never seen this before. I was just suddenly shown my entire energy field. I saw these dark holes in it. And then I saw these flower heads being put in those holes to fill them. And they weren't pointing outwards, they were pointing inwards. And they were radiating back to me my light. So the impact of it was intensely uncomfortable. Not only was I was obviously used to having an aura full of holes and quite happily leaking everything away. So they plug that, which is difficult enough, but that not only that, they then radiate back and mirror back this luminescence. And I was shown, that this is potentially what you could be standing in, and this is what you can help others stand in, to get comfortable with being a light being. And that was an incredibly powerful lesson and very challenging. I still think I'm challenged by that.
Sounds like a real growth place for a lot of people. Certainly I know that I've experienced that myself, where it's, in order to not threaten anyone, you try to be real small and sort of keep yourself down so that you won't stick your head up above and get it whacked off, so there's all of these pieces that, who do you think you are? It kind of comes down to the shame that comes from what we're taught, that, being shiny and bright and brilliant is not really okay. You need to fit in and be smaller, and then your field gets full of holes.
Yeah. And I think, the association with being shiny and brilliant is that it's somehow egotistical or arrogant or brazen in some way. And we all know that that's not what true potency looks like. You look at our great spiritual teachers of these times, people like Dalai Lama or Eckhart Tolle, or there's so many of them. They are humble, beautiful beings of light. They do light with grace and gentleness. There's no bravado about it. And I think when we reclaim or realign to this softer, more wholesome view of what it is to be in our power, it starts to become more accessible. And we realize, we don't have to go and shout about ourselves or do this, that, and the other, but we also don't have to deny ourselves and put ourselves down and not make our full spiritual contribution to this life, because really that is what we're here to do.
Yeah, going back to that combination, when I saw it, it really called out to me. It really resonated, the light support. And the first essence that you talked about, Angel Star, I thought, what is that? And saw that it was Stellaria gramineae, I guess. Yeah. And that's really interesting because we have a common spring green here that's blooming right now called chickweed, which is Stellaria medea. And I made an essence with that a while ago, when I first started making essences, and found a real sense, something similar, with a real sense of that connection to the starry universe, and it being, I was sitting in a field of chickweed and just feeling like they were all little twinkling stars, on the earth, and pulling in that universal light energy, and sort of just helping us feel like we're part of a grand design and something bigger than ourselves. So I've always had this real fondness for that flower, and I love to see that and to hear your story about it being the first essence that you made. They look very similar as well in their pictures, but I haven't met the one that you're talking about.
Right, yeah, because we have chickweed here, and you're right. They are related, and yeah, very, very similar energies. Stellaria gramineae means grass-like star, and it's actually got incredibly fine stems so that you can hardly see them. And what it does is it uses the stability of kind of more robust plants, and it grows up amongst them, and they kind of hold it upright because it would just get flattened otherwise. And then, so you don't really see in amongst all of their foliage its stem. And so all you see is this constellation of stars in amongst all the other plants. And it's as if it has just appeared there by magic. It's absolutely beautiful.
Lovely.
I'm really delighted that you came back to that, because I was so excited to hear about that particular plant and how compelling it seems. And as you were describing it and describing the essence qualities, it really brought me back to Serato from Dr. Bach, of that quality of connecting to that soul self, that connecting to that higher sense of self, and that it speaks to me because that was one of the essences in his line that's made that the plant originated in the Himalayas, and so I've connected with that plant from a wild state also, and really feel that it was such a transcendent kind of essence for the line. It really speaks to that ability to reconnect to your true self, to your soul, that is much above all of the other chitter chatter and the things your mind says. And it reminded me, I've made a essence of what I call Little Serato, which is a ceratostigma minus rather than ceratostigma. Oh gosh, I've forgotten the Serato at the moment. It'll come later. It's a different species, but it has a much smaller flower and it grows much more upright. But I find it has that quality that you're talking about in this essence of helping you ground, but also connect to the higher sense. It has that sky blue color, and so it brings in that crown chakra, that wisdom that can flow through, those two poles of your being, the uprightness, that we're grounded, but we're also spiritual. Two things are happening at once.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, that we can hold both things in one space.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. There's another plant that springs to mind. I don't know whether you have this growing over there. It's we know it as one-flowered wintergreen, Monesis uniflora. And this is a really rare plant over here. So it grows in Scots pine woodlands, so old Scots pine woodlands, and they need to be coastal so that they're on sand. And so that's its habitat and nothing else. And there's a nature reserve up in the north of Scotland that has those ideal circumstances. And they and they kind of have it protected. It's growing there, and it's only kind of 2 or 3 inches high. And again, it's one that's just a single stem to a single flower, and it looks like, I think of it as like a little old-fashioned street lamp, you know, the ones that kind of would just bow over, and these really nice old street lamps, and they'd shine that little bit of light, just that pool of light, just under where they were, and so it has this lovely white flower, very graceful, and it just looks down on on this particular area, and this is an essence that's for spiritual sight, being able to see your life with spiritual eyes. So the keynote for it is good in all things, seeing the good in all things. And so often when we're in a situation and we see it from our personality level, we see it from, okay, how does this impact me? And then maybe how does this impact my family? And there's that, the personal human level, which is absolutely fine and absolutely appropriate, and we need to kind of take care of that. But sometimes we can get stuck if we only look at our life from there. And if we don't shift to that higher perspective that gives us like an overview that's just so much more holistic. And there's a question that I love to ask myself when I'm really stuck with something. If a situation out there in the world is just feeling unfair, or someone I think is being unfair, or and I get into that almost like a victim mentality, and I catch myself doing that, then I like to turn that around and say, okay, so if spirit was giving me the fastest way to evolve at this moment through this situation, then what's the opportunity I'm being given here? What would be like 3 spiritual lessons I'm getting here? And this actually comes from a book called The Heart Math Solution by Dr. Childra. And it's a lovely question. It's this idea of, okay, this feels really personal to me on a very human level, but if I look at this in terms of my spiritual evolution, then for me that always turns it round. It's maybe like, oh, here I'm being given an opportunity to say something that's difficult in a way that isn't defensive, or I'm being given an opportunity to not just stay in the rut of my normal reactive thinking, and to see if my emotional palette can be a little bit broader than that, if I can bring in some new colors here and respond in a new way, in a way that's more authentic to who I am now. Whether this helps me to see people with more tolerance, whatever it might be, when we shift to that spiritual perspective, it's like we broaden out, we open up, we don't stay this little isolated thing that needs defending. We become our wholeness again. And there's a lovely quotation, which is one of my favorites, that's in the Course in Miracles, and it's, "In my defenselessness, my safety lies." And I've been thinking about it a lot in these times. I've been thinking about how I'm seeing a lot of defensive behavior. And I'm also thinking about how when I see that defensive behavior, it can trigger my defensive behavior because I don't like the defensive behavior, and there's this crazy wheel then that you get on. So it's like, okay, yeah, what's the spiritual gift here? Can I open beyond that reactiveness and just bed in a little bit more into my heart and relax around this a little bit more, and not have my moral policeman pop up inside and start saying things in my head, So I love the one flowered wintergreen for its gentleness and its clarity. I feel like I just tune back into that spiritual perspective again, and that feels really practical and really useful.
Yeah, very useful right now, but also just with any relationship, any marriage could probably use that one.
Yeah.
And also this, to me, I'm looking at this, everything you've been bringing up so far, it speaks to where we rest within our community. It's not just that we are expanding outwards into this diffuse spirituality, but it's how do we bridge that? How do we bring that into our communities, into our lives, into our relationships? And I love what you're talking about. These essences, especially that first one, it grows up in community. It needs the support of its community in order to do what it does, right? And so I'm just so touched at this connection that we're experiencing right in this moment, where we're connecting to each other as community, and we're able to ground in, just as these plants are doing, and forming that deep rootedness and drawing on their community as they rise up into the flowering awareness of the greater self, the wider story, the bigger picture. And I'm just so touched that we're having this conversation today, because it's really tough when we feel all alone. And like you're saying, that defensiveness comes up of like, I have to protect myself. And yet in this space right now, we can breathe a little bit, and we can feel that connection, and we can feel that support from each other and from nature and from the essences. And I'm so just darn touched that you're with us today and in this moment with us. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's lovely to remember this potential in ourselves as well, isn't it? Because I think these times are really calling for this responsiveness, not reaction, but responsiveness. And there was I saw a beautiful thing on Facebook the other day. Someone said, "We were made for these times. We've got this." And, there's just something about that. This is not something that needs to bring us down or break us. This is something that can be opportunity after opportunity, moment after moment, to be in our tolerance, in our love for ourselves and for others. Because as we turn that kindness towards ourselves, then we've got it in abundance to share. It comes from there. I often think about the difference between giving from the solar plexus and giving from the heart chakra. And when someone's giving from the solar plexus, and the solar plexus is very much about our self-identity and our confidence and our sense of who we are. When we're giving from that place, it often comes with a hidden price tag. It's like we're giving to get approval. And there is a need behind that giving, which other people will feel. And if we don't get the price tag that we were hoping for, then we can feel resentful. And, so a lot of duty and responsibility can come from that place. Whilst when we give from the heart, it's just a loving, generous, intuitive, responsive moment of outpouring and connection. It's deeply heartwarming. It feeds us, it feeds the person that it's going to. It's just this two-way street. It's beautiful and it's effortless. And, so we can be doing good things on the outside, but it really does need to be connected up with our heart, because otherwise we can drain ourselves and we can get into resentment and frustration because we haven't been giving to ourselves, we're just giving to everybody else. And there's the potential, certainly for care workers in this time who are being called on to give and give and give, that if they're not giving back to themselves, then that they can get burnt out, and that care needs to be self-care, and that level of tending is deeply appropriate and not to be missed out on. And I think that's really important for people to remember. Feed it there and it will just effortlessly pour out in beautiful ways. But if it's coming out in snarky ways, or it's coming out in ways that feel a bit contractual and like, I'll do this for you if you'll do this for me, then the likelihood is you're not being given to yourself enough. And, it's a good time to go back in and listen and tend that. And there's lovely, lovely essences for the heart. I mean, every single range has beautiful, glorious essences for the heart. So anything that just tends and touches and talks to that receiving love is beautiful for that. But yeah, I think that's an important part of this, an important piece in these times.
I am so appreciative of this energy that you've brought here today in just helping coalesce these feelings and this light work that we're all doing.
And where can people find more about your work and about you? And we'll of course put these links in the show notes. But I really want. I feel so connected to you right now, and I'm going to run over to your website and look deeper into it because I'm just really compelled by what you've shared. But how do our listeners find out more about you and your work?
Okay, well, there's a few ways. So there's the LightBringer Essence website itself, which is lightb.co.uk. And that's got all the information on the essences, and you can sign up to my newsletter on there. And I don't bombard. I tend to do a newsletter every kind of month or two. So I won't be in your inbox every week. And then I have my own website, rachelsingleton.com, and that's where any information about anything I'm teaching, any consultations, and I work online, so I work with people all around the world. I do Zoom and phone and all the rest of it. So people can work with me there. I also do something called soul readings, which are like a deep divinatory exploration of people's soulscape at this time, their energetic landscape. So you can find out about all of those kind of things, all my offerings on there. And at the moment, I'm offering essence consultations at half the price that I normally do, because I just really want to offer that service in these times. And then I'm on Facebook. LightBringer Essences is on Facebook, so you can follow me there. I've only really got going with that over the last few months. So yeah, just building up a tribe there. So do join me there. That would be lovely. I think they're the main ways. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And we're just really grateful for you sharing your message and your insights from so many beautiful years of healing work and helping people with the essences and beyond. So thanks so much for being here. And we hope everyone who's listening will feel more grounded and stable and connected and healed from hearing about the flowers and hearing about the gifts of nature that can help all of us endure and thrive even these times with a measure of grace, perhaps. So hopefully you'll join us again. We really hope that you will come again on the podcast. And we just want to send our love to our podcast family, everyone who listens to the podcast and shares these gifts with their friends and their family of the essences, because these are powerful healing tools that will help us get through these times. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you both. It's been absolutely lovely to spend this time with you and to go deep on things that feel so soul nurturing at this time. So thank you for this space, and to your listeners.
You've been listening to the Flower Essence Podcast with Urkana Feld and Kathleen Aspens, and we appreciate your interest in connecting with nature on a deeper level. You can find us online at thefloweressencepodcast.com or join us on Facebook and continue the discussion.
This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. We are not physicians and do not diagnose, prescribe, or treat medical conditions. Please consult with your own physician or healthcare practitioner regarding the suggestions and recommendations made by the hosts and guests of the Flower Essence Podcast.